The importance of this discussion, and from the offset, I would like to thank all those that have contributed to the successful facilitation of this meeting, including the London conference organizers from both Somalia and the UK.
Force Fund is founded on the best ideals of civic action and the true values of responsible entrepreneurship to enable development, which is of great importance in a post-conflict state like Somalia, where public institutions are recovering but weak and the government security forces are actively fighting criminal groups at home. Sadly, the evidence tells us that many of the vulnerable radicalized youth that criminal groups rely on in Somalia are driven to the extreme more by poverty and lack of alternative opportunities than ideologies. Therefore, Force Fund envisages complementing the work of local governments across all Somali regions by supporting entrepreneurs and communities through financing and skills training to transform their lives. It is sad that many today do not feel they have much to offer themselves and their society in Somalia. However, with support and adequate financing for their ambitions, where it is economically viable, this can be quickly turned into a hope that drives forward Somalia's economic recovery and social cohesion.
Global Somali Diaspora was created in 2014 in Istanbul when over 100 Somalis, professional Somalis, from all kinds of backgrounds and educational backgrounds gathered there and thought and talked about ways to get the community engaged and the community united. It was created to address two questions. How do we make our community engaged and integrated into the new countries that we live in, and how do we get engaged within Somalia and participate in the development and the reconstruction and the peace process for that country. So we had two major tasks, and we thought about it in the way we engaged the communities, where we opened in chapters in many different parts of the world. We are global after all, it's in our name. So we have chapters in many parts of Europe, the United Kingdom included. We have chapters in many parts of the United States where I live, Canada, Australia, and we are about to open some chapters in Asia. So we kind of remain true to the global aspect of our name that way. One of the ways we stayed true to the engagement of Somalia is you are all very aware the returning global members to Somalia and how they participate in government, in the private sector, in businesses. What we are striving to do is to make this activity organized so people don't just go on their own. We are trying to catalog the different educational experiences, the different expertise by both subject matter, but by also regional groups. So when the Somali government, for example, needs X number of doctors, we have a database to go to and say who's coming out of school, who is interested in going to either volunteer or train somebody. So we have a very ambitious and very big program to really catalog and centralize all different expertise and knowledge. We also know that the Somali government today has a lot of diaspora, returning diaspora, whether it's in parliament or even the two highest positions in government.
I'm going to just touch on a couple of things. One thing is about economic recovery. We know, as has been highlighted, Somali diaspora, it's major investor. And I think good example, just, the director of Hormuz and others is a good example. They, present over 75% of Somali's, startup capital, but also more than 23% of Somalia's GDP. So you can see, in terms of the amount of Somali, investment goes into Somali diaspora go into Somalia. The good examples, when I went to last year, we had, Somali Global Diaspora. We organized the first international conference by Somali Global Diaspora in Mogadishu, and we saw so many Somalis, who, went back to Somalia and made, so many investments, including printing, publications, including, travel and tourism area, telecommunication, as just seen, remote remittance, and other parts of trade. We know in Leicester how Somalis actually transformed a no-go area into thriving business and community provision hub. And so Somalis are very entrepreneurial people, and I think we have to tap into that. The other thing is about, when you look, for example, in Somalis, like example, the drought emergency now that's going on, how Somali diaspora has mobilized together around the world and supporting Somalia. That is a clear example of how Somali diaspora are, asset to their country. And that is absolutely something we can be very proud of. And it's not just people sending money to their loved ones, friends, families. It's that, patriotic kind of sense. The community spirit, everyone wants to do and support it. Sarah also touched, I think the biggest resource that Somalia has is people, the human capital. And I think that is what Somali diaspora actually provides.
So I want to touch on two things, and I'll be very brief since we only have about 3 minutes. One is how the government can become a catalyst for economic recovery, economic development, and the other one is how the private sector can become a catalyst for economic recovery and development. And they are two different things, but we need to marry them together. And this is a subject that I'm very excited about, because in my last job as a planning minister in Somalia, my job was actually to think about how to develop the economy of the country. A country whose annual budget is about $260 million, probably the lowest budget of any country in the world, one of the lowest GDPs in the world, the 5th poorest country in the world. I can go on. The statistics are remarkably sad. But what is not very sad is the people. Everybody mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit of Somali people. So then, as I was thinking about what to do with this, and I was just given this big title of being the planning minister of Somalia, how to translate this into real things. The thing that came back to me all the time was, how do you revive an economy that actually has no basis from which to revive from? So from a government perspective, I looked at what are the major constraints that are facing the government to revive economy. Some of the constraints are policies, others are practical things. In terms of policies, when I was given the position, one of the things that was missing was foreign investment law, for example, which you need in order, big companies and others to invest in your country. You need to have a foreign investment law. So in December 2015, we worked very, very hard to produce a law, passed it in the cabinet, and then passed it in the parliament very expeditiously, actually, because everybody wanted to pass it. Problem is, once we passed it, we realized that we need about 6 other laws to support that one. We actually came here to London at a major international conference last year, I believe it was February 2016, and found out that everybody was talking about, do you have insurance law passed? No. Do you have finance and banking law passed in your country? No. Do you have 6 other laws that you need to pass? Then you realize the extent to which you really need to focus this in a very comprehensive manner. And so we now have at least a very clear roadmap of the number of legislations that we need to pass to get to where we want to get to in order to facilitate meaningful and substantial improvement in terms of the policies around economic development. How do you develop an economy with such a $250 million budget? There is absolutely no way, of which 40% goes to security, another 50% goes to other types of salaries, so 90% of your budget, or slightly more actually, goes to wage bill. And about 4% is dedicated to critical services like education and health and that kind of thing. There is no way you can do that. So what do other countries do? They go and borrow a lot of money from banks and other countries. So we try to do that only to find out that we have $5.5 billion debt, of which we need to pay back to 28 countries and international institutions, including a lot of international financial institutions. And now, thanks to London Conference and others in the UK government, we have an excellent, clear roadmap on how to get rid of the debt for Somalia. It's going to take us about 2 years if you do very well. Kopi, am I right?
Best case scenario.
Best case scenario. Thank you very much for reminding me that all the time. 2 years or more, probably more, to get to where we need, so we can actually end up clearing our debt. Everybody wants to clear our debt, but it's just that we need to meet certain benchmarks to do that. Once we clear our debt, then we can start borrowing billions of dollars. That's the first chance that you can actually inject substantial amount of money into the economy, create a lot of jobs for the country, and so on and so forth. And Abdullahi from Hormuz is here, Hormuz Foundation. Hormuz is probably the largest employer in the country, am I correct? Larger than the government, which has 5,200 and so civil servants and maybe 28,000 or so security people. Now, yes, Hormuz is doing well and other companies are doing well, but is that actually enough? I mean, 80% of our people are still unemployed. The problem with our economy is that you have the haves, which is maybe 5% of the population, and the have-nots, which is about 95% of the population. We can't talk about meaningful economy with such a disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Every country in the world focuses on the middle class. You've heard that a lot, right? When people are talking about. That's what we need to revive, to give people opportunities to create businesses and others. And what you need is, we need to empower the private sector, but also create a level playing field. At the moment, the playing field is so unlevel that very few companies are doing super well, and most companies are unable to get to get off the ground.
The word Himilo. Himilo is a Somali word, and it means hope for the better. We have started Himilo, a training organization that works with actually community housing to help with the community that we work into training and employment. So as you can see, the majority of the work that we do is either getting people into employment or in business. So I would like to share with you a model that we have developed, which again can be very much replicated in Somalia, about the 5-stage initiative model about refugee integration and refugee resettlement. I know that accommodation is very critical when it comes to and accommodation support is very much critical to in terms of integration and settlement. But what we have realized that getting people into work and getting people to start their own business is actually the most critical thing that we need to do. So we have started with the housing side, but we have very much quickly developed it into training. So we have been doing for the past 4 or 5 years a lot of training activities, of which I would like to share with you a little bit further. The lessons that we have learned from the past 5 years working with the Somali diaspora in terms of getting into work, the first one of them is how could we actually give people sector-specific skills which can help them get into work. So for example, we have been working in Bristol, and what we have been trying to do is to get Somali mothers who are actually jobless into work. And we have realized that by helping them to become teacher assistants, working with the children of which their schools go would be a very good step forward. So we have decided that we will focus the balance in training, the balance making them teacher assistants. So teaching and giving people sector-specific skills is a way that can help them get into work. Similarly, in Somalia, there are a lot of key priorities, a lot of key sectors, of which if we can train people, we can get them into work. For example, fishery, for example, agriculture, for example, livestock. So giving people specific skills about the sectors which we know are in priority, about the sectors which we know there's huge demand, could be a good step forward in getting people into work.